Welcome back to the Retirement Fiduciary Podcast, your classroom with no BS financial education, a place where we have authentic discussions about retirement planning, investment management, tax reduction strategies, insurance, estate planning, and more. Here's your host, Adam Koos, President, Portfolio Manager, and Senior Financial Advisor at Libertas Wealth Management Group.
All right, everybody, this is a special one for me. I need you to strap in, turn up the volume as we welcome the creative and endlessly curious Phillip O'Rourke to the show. Phillip is I've got a couple secrets to share at the end of my intro here, but meanwhile, just an official intro. Phillip is a seasoned animator and illustrator. He brings the world of ideas to life with the stroke of his pen. I'm sure you've known people like this. He captivates audiences from the silver screen to digital canvases, whether that be with music, film, worldwide, brands, companies. His journey from doodling on scraps of paper to masterminding animation for top-tier ad agencies encapsulates not just a career, but a lifelong passion for storytelling and art and music. And I can't emphasize more how amazing Phillip is when it comes to music. Today's a little different. This is a really special episode to me, like I mentioned, personally, because it's not really about finance. It's not about business. We're not going to talk about estate planning or taxes today. It's going to be extremely different. Instead, this is a discussion with a down-to-earth, creative individual I used to personally write and produce music with way back in the early 2000s. And I do hope that we'll get a chance to do it again sometime soon, maybe when we're not both so busy with our respective activities, work, families, and so on. But today you're going to hear us dive into a pseudo How I Built It episode, peeking behind corners and exploring the mind and life thus far of someone that I consider to be a creative genius, truly. So the goal in this episode was to hear not only the good and bad times in the life of someone who's had their fair share of personal challenges, but to get a little uncomfortable as Phillip shares how he's dealt with some of these obstacles throughout his life that perhaps maybe you can identify with as well. So call it a passion project, if you will, but I hope you'll enjoy a conversation that's very different than most of what we publish as I sit down and get into some deep thoughts with my very good longtime friend, Phillip O'Rourke. All right, everybody. So get ready for a conversation filled with inspiration with the always insightful, deep thinking, one and only Phillip O'Rourke. Thank you so much for joining me, Phillip.
Hey, thanks for having me.
If any of you aren't aware or aren't big football fans, there's this thing called a home and home. And that's when, like, for instance, Ohio State plays Oregon this year in Oregon, and next year they're going to play Ohio State at the Shoe in Columbus. It's called a home and home. So Phillip and I got reconnected here recently, and I was recently on his podcast, and we'll call that the first home, and now this is the second home. So we're doing a home and home here. But to elaborate a little bit more, this is going to be a really interesting episode because it's different than anything I've ever done, both with the Retirement Fiduciary podcast as well as Elevate Your Business, because I know we've done several How I Built It episodes, and that's kind of what this is going to be like. But the reason it's so different is because I have known Phillip for probably 24 years. And Phillip is a very, I don't want to say very old friend, because that sounds like, I guess we have to be careful where we put the commas, right?
Right.
A long time friend, let's call it. There's some things that you're going to learn throughout this episode that maybe most of you don't know about me or know about, obviously about Phillip and I, but Phillip is not only a digital creator, an animator, an illustrator, somebody who has a great podcast that you got to check out, thephillipshow.com, or I think it's phillipo'rourke.com, isn't it?
It's both.
It's both. Okay, thephillipshow.com, phillipo'rourke.com. But he's also a genius musician. And I know he's going to blush here, but true story, this guy can write lyrics like no other, and more importantly, he can write arrangements that are just melodically just whimsical and I don't know, what's the word I'm looking for? I'm drawing a blank. What is it? Hypnotizing. There we go. Hypnotizing. So anyway, back in the day, we used to write music together. I hope we'll do it again someday, but we used to have a lot of fun doing it. But the purpose of these, call it How I Built It episodes, is to talk to successful people who've had ups in their lives, downs in their lives, great successes, rough times, And I just really wanted to hear, I'm sure I'm going to learn some things today, by the way, but I just wanted to hear your story and share it with our audience as well. So let's just dive right in. Tell me,
Yeah,
what was childhood like for you? Where'd you grow up?
sure. I grew up and thank you for having me on. This is very, very, very exciting. Uh,
Yeah.
I grew up in Springfield, Ohio. That's where I was born. And then my mother is from Yellow Springs, so a lot of my family is from Yellow Springs. So we moved there, and that's where I kind of spent the rest of my childhood through high school.
Okay. And can you share kind of were there any pivotal moments when you were a kid? Maybe there's more than one from your childhood to early life that kind of significantly shaped who you are today?
Yeah. So we grew up, me and my brother, I have one brother. His name's Jason. Shout out to Dr. Big Bro. Um, we grew up in a very religious, in a small family, but very religious. So it was very strict. So that has really shaped how I view kind of not white and black in terms of colors, but right and wrong. So there's like really no gray. It's either yes or no, and maybe is kind of weird to me. So I think through growing up, say in church and being strict that way, and um, and just having a very rigid childhood, I think that really shaped how I perceive the world, how I navigate through the world, and how I treat people, if you will, and how I see different situations. I would say growing up for me was a little bit more challenging. I guess everybody has their own story, but for me, it was a little bit more challenging because I was dealing with sexuality as well. So that coupled with the Old Testament, coupled
Yeah,
with
a little bit.
church, coupled with a whole bunch of things, that really crafted how I started to maneuver and the personality that I started to, I guess, create would be a better word. Uh,
Create. Interesting word.
yeah. Well, if you spend a lot of time knowing that you're not supposed to be something, for me, I just tried to create something else.
That makes sense.
And it's like, oh, okay, well, we'll create this. Maybe this will be fine. So I spent a lot of time, and that really has um, been the thread in my life all the way up until today. That has really kind of been the constant of who are you? What are you doing? Are you okay? Are you all right
Yeah.
with? So and that's all started from childhood.
What were some of the things that you maybe a story or two, things you had to deal with growing up that, kind of, I don't know, having things, I don't want to say having things rougher because I don't want to, say the wrong
Yeah.
thing here, but I think obviously having things a little bit tougher than most people. You've got a really religious, family. They have certain expectations. You joked about the Old Testament, even though it's not a joke at all, right?
Yeah.
Couple other things going on with sexuality, maybe even race, things like that. I mean,
Mhm.
that's a lot. That's a lot to be resilient about.
Yes. Yeah. So I mean, I would say yes. Again, I don't think that my life was any harder than anybody else's, but I can only live mine. And from my perspective, when I would look out, I guess, into the world and see other people's lives, mine was it seemed just a little bit different. There were just things that I just had to navigate around that it seemed like other people didn't have to. And I think part of it was because I kept trying to fit in. So in
Mm,
order to fit in, that means you know that you're different. So all I was trying to do was get to be like the people who I was trying to fit in with, and it would just kind of be normal. When it comes to church, homosexuality in church isn't, it's not the best pairing. So when it came to me and not really knowing what that was, but I knew that I wasn't allowed to be that. Like when you're younger, like people would call you this and call you that. I didn't
mm,
really know what that was. Like I'm feminine, I'm this, my hair is too curly, I'm too skinny, my voice is too high, all these things. I didn't know what gay was. But I knew that nobody liked it.
mm.
So whatever I could do to run away from that, that's what I tried to do. And I think that was kind of you throw black on top of it, that was a bit much. But I think that was like when I said, creating a character and things like that, that's where all that came from. Just like,
Yeah.
ooh, whatever that is, I don't want to be that. And then when I realized I was that, I was really like, well, I can't say that. You know what I mean? It was like, I
Yeah.
can't. Like, wow, we can't do that. So, yeah.
Yeah. So it's almost like the beginning of an alter ego, so to speak.
Yes. I mean, it really was that. I mean, it wasn't to that extreme. However, I always say that I tried to create a role and cast myself as somebody else in the play of life.
Mm,
So everything was
yeah.
like, okay, how I'm very conscious of how I sit, how I walk, how I talk, how I'm saying this, what I'm saying this, how are you thinking about this? Who do you want to see today? Did I do this right? So I would try and create this character from the perception that I thought other people had of me and create the character that I thought would be acceptable. And I always
Mm.
say I was a horrible casting director. Horrible.
Casting director.
Horrible. But that's where, we talk about, we talk about youth and we talk about, midlife and we talk about being older now, more mature now. And it can all relate back to how did you start doing that? And then after a while, it just became part of what my norm was. Like I'm so used to creating this. I'm so used to being
Yeah.
authentic. I'm so used to worrying about what you think about me that it was just part of my nature. It was just part of who I am. And to not do that was weird. It's like
Hard to
weird.
break out of.
Yeah, it became routine and it became my personality. So
Yeah. What was your first job growing up?
my very first job was Young's Jersey Dairy here in yeah, my first job was Young's Dairy. My whole family used to work there. So my mom, she was one of the managers at Young's. My brother was old enough to work there. And then I would go to Young's and there was a lady named Betty. She was in the baking department. She made all the
Betty in the baking department.
Yeah, so while my mom was working, I would work with Betty because I was too little to wash trays or do anything like that. This is back when they made everything from scratch.
Yeah.
So once I got old enough to work, I was allowed to wash trays, but I was too short to wash the trays. So I had to stand on these crates and get into this big old sink and wash these trays. So Young's Dairy was my very, very first job.
What other jobs did you have growing up?
I worked, let me see, growing up, I worked at Young's. I think through high school, that was pretty much it.
Oh, really? So they called the
Yeah.
same job the whole time. You don't hear that a lot. You
Yeah.
want to hear
Is
my
it
story?
true?
God, I had so many freaking
Yeah.
jobs.
Well, I mean, there really isn't a lot of, listen, I'm from a little small
I guess
town.
that's true. It is
There's not that
Springfield.
much around here. So yeah, and it was very flexible. I was in sports. So that it's a very student centric
Oh,
and
okay.
employer relationship. So they understood. They employed a lot of high school people from around the county. So
Did you have to deal with any I guess struggles or tough times relating to everything we just talked about in the workplace at all?
mhm. Yeah, always. Yeah, always. And I don't want to be all dramatic, but I mean, I just
No,
keep it
you're
real.
fine.
That was um that was always the thing that I would always have to fight against. That was always I knew the minute if somebody had any sort of pushback or somebody said anything about me, it was going to be me being gay or something. And this is before I even came out, mind you.
Yeah.
So I hadn't even accepted that this is what my reality is. That was not even I wasn't even there. I didn't get there till like 10 years later. But this is what my label
Right.
that was a label, so I had to deal with it. Yeah, in the workplace, and it was weird. It was generally the you would think it would be guys. You know what I mean?
Okay.
You would think it would be guys that would
I
be
would
kind of,
too.
but it was odd because I had more problems with more of the girls.
Really? That's shocking to
Mhm.
me. Tell me
Yeah,
about
the
that.
guys would be a little bit more standoffish. Well, my
Uh,
brother worked there too, so they weren't gonna go crazy.
huh.
But the girls had a little bit more mouth, and which was odd because I normally got along with girls better, but when I didn't, it was like they just had so much to say. So it's
That's
like
such a polite way of putting it. They just had so much to say.
yeah. So, but I thought, but yeah, 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 yeah. So in the workplace, it was more. I really didn't have too many problems. Like being black was never the thing, because I think I was used to that. Like I'm different in this way, but you're making a lot of assumptions
Hmm.
the other way. I'm clearly black, but you just assuming stuff about my life and my lifestyle is just a bit much.
Yeah.
Um,
I can't even
so
imagine. Yeah.
yeah.
I don't mean to fast forward so much, but we go through high school, you go to college. Did you go to Wilberforce?
I did not. I went
Oh,
to Kentucky State University.
Kentucky State. I didn't know that. Okay. And
Hmm.
what was your major? What'd you do? What was your subject matter you studied there?
Yeah, I studied marketing. I had a
Marketing.
few different majors, yeah, but my passion and my core was marketing.
Well, it makes sense now, doesn't it? Now
Yeah,
that given what you do now.
yeah.
When you got out of college, you and I met through a mutual friend. Obviously, we started doing tons of music together. Um, what when you and I parted ways and you went to, I believe it was Atlanta first, wasn't it?
Hmm.
You were in Atlanta for a while, then you went to New York. Is that right?
Uh-huh.
There was some other tough times that you
Yeah.
experienced. And by the way, I promise I'm not going to tread on the negative here. I'm going to turn things around. I promise. But
That's
I do
okay. It's
I do want to
okay.
know about some of those rough times because you speak on your podcast a lot about just being open and honest with yourself and you being you. So I mean, share a little bit about what you went through then and kind of how you came out on the other side in obviously in incredible shape.
Yeah, well,
Not
thank
everybody
you.
could do that. I mean, I don't.
Well, thank you. Yeah, so I moved to Atlanta, and then while in Atlanta, I'm still trying to find myself. I'm in my 20s at this point, I believe, 20 something,
Hmm.
uh, 20 something. Yeah, so I'm still trying to find myself. I'm making new friends. I'm out at this point, going out to clubs, and just my life was just a bit. Turmoil wouldn't be the best word. On the outside, I looked great.
Okay.
On the outside, I looked great. On paper, I looked fine. On the stage, I was great, but inside, I was like completely lost. So I ended up, being in so many places I shouldn't be. I ended up becoming a crazy alcoholic. I was doing other drugs while I was there too, and I just didn't really know how to stop the world and get off.
Hmm.
I just didn't know how to do that. I don't know if it was pride. I don't know what it was, but I just couldn't. As many times as I tried to regroup, I'm like, well, this time will be different. Well, this time will be different. And that time was never different. I moved to New York thinking different places would create different scenarios.
Hmm.
And the only bad thing about that, it wasn't the place, it was the person, so it doesn't matter where I
Yeah.
am, my behavior and my mentality was the same. I was still the same person struggling with the same things, and I just changed locations. So it didn't make New York any better. All this time, I have a great career. I'm doing some really great things. At this time, I was a makeup artist. So, I mean, I was kind of everywhere, but I was completely falling apart,
Hmm.
completely falling apart. And after I left New York, I just needed to, I needed to change the scenery. And I was like, I just need to leave. I went back to Atlanta
Oh,
and,
I
and then
didn't know that.
yeah, yeah. So I left New York and I went back to Atlanta. I'm telling you, I've been so many, and I'm giving you the outskirts of all the story.
Yeah. No, I know. I
Um,
can tell.
yeah. So I went back to Atlanta and then from there, I decided to come home.
Okay.
When I decided to come home, my mom has always been like on the other end of the phone through all my crap and through all my situations. She's been on the other end of the phone this entire time. And when I came home, my mom, she suggested that I go to rehab.
Hmm.
And I didn't know what else to do. I am the kind of person that has everything sort of figured out. I'm very
Planner. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I can figure everybody's life out but my own. You know what I mean? Like I can figure it all out. And it was so frustrating because like I cannot figure this out. So to make a long story short, I ended up going to a residential rehab program and I completed that and I graduated and all of that. And then, just really trying to figure out how do I put these pieces back together. And again, it goes back to, am I comfortable inside here? All of my talents, all of my resume, all of my whatever, everything on the outside didn't matter, because in the inside, I was really having a hard time,
Yeah.
you know,
Was there
and
was it the phone call with mom when she said, maybe rehab makes sense? Was that the big kind of pivotal moment? Was there a time earlier when when you were starting to get, I don't know, step outside yourself and look inward and go, maybe I do need to make a change here? Or how'd
I
that work?
didn't, I did, but I didn't know how.
Hmm.
I did not, I didn't know how. And I think everybody thought that I did because I could do everything else. So he'll be okay. He'll be all right.
Yeah.
He'll figure it out. And then it's almost like one of those things where you're just like trying to scream, like, I actually won't be okay. This is actually not all right. I actually don't know what to do. So when she said that, I think I was at the point where I was just like, that's fine, like
Yeah.
that's fine because I don't know what else to do. So that started me on the road to recovery, and it's been a long road, to be
Oh,
fair.
sure.
But that was the moment that I started to say, I'm going to change something about this, and I don't know what to do. Maybe these people do, maybe this will help, maybe blah,
Yeah.
blah.
I mean,
So,
I mean, I've known you a long time, and I feel like, um, tell me if I'm wrong here at all, but I feel like you're a super kind, warm, approachable, friendly, extroverted, like, you're a fun person. And from the outside looking in, it would definitely seem like you've got everything together, organized, regimented, you know what I mean? Um, a big time planner. And I think that at least, you know, until you started the podcast, and I think this was one of the things I love about your podcast is that you seemed like such a private person on the same hand. While you could be very extroverted and very approachable, like I said, you could also be very private when it comes to your personal life for probably a number of reasons, having, maybe something to do with what we've already talked about and other things we haven't talked about. But on your podcast, you're so open, transparent, and I, I mean, was that awkward for you to kind of start opening up and sharing all this stuff? Because I mean, this isn't easy to share.
the answer is it was very tough. It was very tough. However, what I will say is my show is was one of the steps to conquering a fear.
Hmm.
It was one of my, and that's why I was saying it's been a long journey because, when I started this show, the Phillip Show during the pandemic, and I was still on that road to be authentic and to really try to enjoy who Phillip is, even after all this. And I'm completely grown now, but still on that journey, be like, okay, do you like who's in the mirror? So I wanted to be authentic. And I think that there's power in sharing. I think that there's power in not being silent and not having secrets. Because I've lived in that space, like you said, I could be very closed off. I sound like I'm being authentic, but I would say a whole bunch of nothing because it didn't have anything to do with me. You know what I mean? Like I can talk circles around whatever and say nothing about myself. And I knew that part of my journey needed to have some intentional authenticity. So even down to when I wanted to start the show, I did. Somebody asked me if I would do a show, and I was like, "Oh my God!" I'm used to being behind the camera, not so much representing me. That's a huge deal. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? Like, okay, I can represent your brand, I can represent a company, I can represent whatever, but you're asking me to represent me, and I'm not quite sure I want to know or want to do that. So, but I did, and I knew that because I'm scared to do it, I know that I have to. So even down to the name of the show, I started trying to figure out, when you start something, much like a song or whatever, you're like,
Hmm.
how can I package this up? How can I package this up? And I started to build a brand. I started to build this brand and hide behind this whole
Ah,
show. And I said, no, I'm going to be authentic. And that's why I called the show the Phillip Show, because it forces me to be myself. And I'm not behind a facade of marketing or branding or imagery or whatever. It's just me. So
yeah,
that's where kind of this came from. And I try to be as transparent as I can, because I do find that there's healing in that for me first and for other people. I'm a huge proponent of I want to see how you're getting there, not that you got there.
sure. That makes total
It's like
sense.
I'm glad that you won the race, but let me see how you pushed through the pain. Let me see how you like fought through that cramp. Let me see how you went through that dehydration. You know what I mean? Like how did you do that? Because I think we see a lot of winners, but we don't see a lot of the how of the winners. And I
Yes.
think that there's more victories that are out there in the how versus the that. So,
You just eloquently described exactly why I wanted to do this, by the way.
oh,
Because, you do so much interviewing other people and discussing important issues, but nobody hears about Phillip, right? So,
yeah,
and actually you just gave me a great segue.
yeah.
Speaking of success, how do you personally define success in your life?
I think success in my life is being content.
Hmm.
And I think that that can be in a myriad of ways. For me, success can no longer be bullet points. Reach this and you have success. Reach this, then you have success. My success is, am I content right now? I'm successful. Am I thankful for what I'm doing right now? This moment is very successful. I could put metrics to it and say, what's my bank account look like? What is my life? How much this and this. But I've learned that those tangible things, they can reduce stress, but it doesn't mean I'm successful. It means that I don't have to worry about X, Y, and Z. But I still have worry. I'll still have all of these things. So I've learned in whatever season that I'm in, can I find contentment
Hmm.
in this season? Am I okay living in this moment? And if the answer is yes, then I have found success. And then tomorrow I'll find it again.
You talked a little bit about how your life started with religion, being a big component, a cornerstone, if you will. And everything you just said kind of, it's almost has like a Buddhist or a Zen ring to it, you
Mm.
know? What do you, what does failure look like then? If success is contentment, when you're off the rails and when things, which inevitably nobody's ever, has a perfect day every day, right? Every week, every month.
Mm.
Is it just not being content? Is it just the opposite, or can you get more specific than that?
Sure. And look, can I?
Reluctantly.
No, no, no. I'm trying to like find my words. So I it's easy for me to call out failure because I'm a pessimist when it comes to that. It's easy for me to see opportunities in areas where people let me use where I need to grow. And it's like, oh, you missed the mark. Oh, you did this. Oh, you did this. Failure to me is a metric versus success. Failure to me, it's like I failed at XYZ.
Okay.
But I've learned that as long as I am willing to try, I'm not a failure because there's still time. There's
Yeah.
still time to get up. I've had so many opportunities to stay down. I've had so many opportunities to give up. I've had so many opportunities, just like I'm just exhausted from trying. But something is like, try again.
Do you have a favorite story in your life so far that it describes, a time of failure, disappointment, whatever you want to call it, and where you were resilient, you stood up, took the punch, let it roll off you, and you know ended up, right back up in that point of contentment?
Wow. Um,
I'm ad-libbing now.
I know, and I'm like, I feel like I have a lot of those moments. You know what I mean?
Do you?
Like, yeah, I do because I've fallen down a lot.
Huh.
You know what I mean? I've fallen down a whole lot. And one story, I've shared this probably one other time, um, verbally, but one story was when I lived in Florida. I was working and I was meeting some people after work, and we were like, oh, we're gonna go out for drinks. It's like, oh, okay, blah, blah, blah. So I was on my way. We went out, we went to drinks and all that. Then I was like, well, I'm gonna go meet my friend at this club. I'll see y'all in a few. Meet me over there. So somehow clearly I'd been drinking, and somehow I got turned around
Hmm.
and I got stopped by the police.
Oof.
Right. And I was like, what's happening? So I get stopped by the police, they pull me over, and I get a DUI.
Yeah.
I I'm like in like the whole jail. You know what I mean? Like this is I'm
Yeah.
completely inebriated, but a very sobering moment. Like I
Hmm.
cannot, this is unreal. And
Well
so many
said.
things are going through my mind because it's like I'm just not in jail. I'm Philip and in jail. You know what I mean? Like there's all of these stereotypes, there's all of this stuff. I watch all these movies. I was like, I cannot
Yeah.
be here. Well, in the morning, um, and the food was horrible. But in the morning, they let
Side
us go
note.
down. Right outside. No, I started crying. I did. I have to tell you, I did. They put this. I had this roommate. This is a whole side, but I had this roommate, and he was very, very nice. And he could tell. He knew that I'd
Oh,
never been there before, but he was like, he was a frequent flyer. He had been there several times, and they brought this thing that looked like sausage, and I'm still trying to conceptualize where I am. You know what I mean? Like I'm still trying to process this. And then they brought this food. I was like, and I literally just started crying. I was like, and I'm supposed to eat this? Like, how long am I gonna have to eat? I couldn't even eat it. I had to get it. but
It's terrible.
it was horrible. I was like, what is my life, right? Really, what is my life? So I get in the morning, we get up and then we go downstairs and you're allowed to watch TV. So on the news, they're flashing all of these faces. And while they're flashing these faces, there had been a shooting at Pulse nightclub in Orlando, the place I was going.
No way.
And I just sat there and I knew some of those faces that were up there. And it was just arresting because, it's like, had it not been for getting a DUI and being in jail, then that could have very well have been me. At
Wow.
that moment, not at that moment, but in that scenario, that whole situation, I started to understand that there was purpose for me. There's some reason, there's something redeemable, there's something of value here. Otherwise, I feel like I would not be here. So I think my mind at that point, even though I had some ups and downs since then, but I think my mind at that point was like, something is worth fighting for. It's like
Yeah.
something is worth fighting for you. So that's where it goes to failure. My failure will be when I decide that trying is too much. So if I stop trying, I will have failed. But unless that happens,
Yeah.
there will still be time. Again, failure is a metric to me. It's like, dang, I failed yesterday, but I'll be better tomorrow,
That's
you
right.
know? But
Great attitude.
yeah, well, thank you.
Thanks for sharing all that, by the way. That's wild. What a story.
Yeah.
Um, and speaking of purpose, so obviously that story had something to do with it, but as you kept seeking out your purpose in life and where you are today, what else kind of helped you find that purpose?
I'm still religious. I'm still very spiritual. I was a worship leader for many, many years.
Hmm.
Uh, and I think that helps. I think me finding purpose, I think that was just a start of value, for me, like value.
Self-value, you mean?
Uh-huh.
Huh. Okay.
Because I mean, I've always known I'm talented, but I didn't know I was valuable as Phillip, because I always thought people wanted never me as a personality, but me as a commodity. It's like I can
Yeah.
do all these things, and this is why people want me to do X, Y, and Z because I'm good at this. I'm good at this. So as long as I continue to produce, as long as I continue to have something of value, and I never really thought the value part was me. So I think it wasn't until then where I was just like, wait a minute, I might be valuable. Like, hold on, there
Yeah.
might be something to me. So I think through the rest of that journey and through the rest of my ups and downs, it's just been a road of just really me discovering, and valuing myself. It's like, okay, I see there's value here. Let me see if I can see it. You know what I mean? Let me see if I agree. Like, do I agree with that? Am I comfortable with this? And I think when it comes to purpose, I don't think I've changed much over the years. I know you and I were writing together, and if we look back at some of the music that we wrote, it's very inspirational. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like a lot of it is. So there's just been this same common thread throughout my entire life, and I think it's just me sort of coming on board to realize that it's not manufactured, it's not a mistake, it's not, all of these things, and I think that goes into what is your purpose? I feel at this point, my purpose is, say, to inspire, to let people know that, you can make it from a place of never thinking that I would or could or wanted to. So I think because of all of the hurdles, I think I'm able to speak from a place of history will show. You know what I mean?
Authenticity for sure.
Yeah, I have that. I say history will show a lot of times because sometimes even, days will be crazy, but history will show that tomorrow can be better. You haven't folded in, you haven't folded through in the towel. History will show that you can make it through this. So,
Yeah. No,
yeah.
that's awesome. What have been some of the biggest mentors in your life, influencers, people that,
Mm.
what have they taught you about finding, wealth? Obviously a financial podcast here, but wealth and
Oh,
relationship and connections, among other things.
yeah. So one of the biggest influences in my life was my brother. Yeah, he continues to be. Just because of his passion for people, his determination for me, you know, it's just
Love it.
it's really incredible. Another one is my friend Pastor Will. He's truly amazing. I am very encouraged by watching people. A lot of
Mm,
times people don't have to say anything to me, you know? So I like to watch how people maneuver. Again, it's like the how are you doing that? And then I'll
mm.
find inspiration and I'll find courage and I'll find, you know, tips and tricks just watching people navigate their own life. Like, how did you handle stress? How did you handle success? Like, how did you handle that person was a mess? How did you do that? Ah, you didn't have to tell me anything, but your example is what is most impactful. Um,
Yes.
yeah.
Success. You hear people say a lot that success is really not about the destination, but it's about the journey.
Mhm.
But I believe that, wealth is a lot more than just a journey, and it's a whole lot more than money. So what would you say, is there any intangible wealth that you value most in your life at this juncture?
You said intangible?
Intangible.
Rest and peace.
Rest. Okay.
Yeah. So,
You didn't
what
think
do I
long and hard
mean
about
by
that at all. You knew it right off the top of your head.
no? Listen. No, and when I say rest, I mean I think that goes back to contentment because I put that
Mm,
with success. You know, I've had a life of, in my mind, again, it's my perception of what I was supposed to be doing, but have a life of striving. I've always been trying to do this, trying to
mm.
do this, trying to do this, trying to do this. And it's exhausting, you know, trying to be this, trying not to be this. And it's like, whoop, I need a minute, you know? So what I've learned, I think COVID helped me with this too. You know, last year I gave myself almost like a year off. I
Hmm.
took everything off of my plate. I took everything off of it. And I said, I'm going to lose everything on the plate. I don't want anything on my calendar. And then I'm going to build it back intentionally. So I know that this is what I want to do. I know that this is a project that I want. I'm saying yes, not out of people pleasing, not out of, you know, whatever, but it's because this is what I chose to put on my plate. And I really realized during that time what rest actually was.
Hmm.
And I was like, this is crazy.
I didn't have time for any rest before.
I wasn't available. I just wasn't available. My mind was not ready to say that doing nothing was okay and that being still is also inactivity.
I think
You know,
most entrepreneurs feel that way, and I
yeah,
don't think they have a clue how to get off the hamster wheel.
I don't know, but listen, don't let me look. I am so fine with resting. Listen, but I learned that, and I learned it was a very self-care year. You know, I learned that I'm valuable enough to make sure that I'm a priority. And it was necessary to do that because I didn't know what balance looked like. I only knew what was imbalanced.
Yeah,
You know, I only know
just like
what
normal.
100 miles an hour is. I have no idea what 50 is. I have no idea because I'm
I'm still
always at
personally working on
100.
that.
Yeah, yeah. So it's like I don't have a point of reference. It's like somebody go rest. I'm like, I actually don't know what that means, you know? So I had to learn what that meant so I could have a median to say, this is off balance now. Hey, we need to add more of this. Hey, you know, so now I have a point of reference. Yeah, so rest was a huge one. And I think with that comes just peace,
Hmm.
um, being okay with not controlling everything, understanding that things will happen, but the world's not going to fall apart. History will show,
Yeah,
you know, it'll be okay. And we'll just re-strategize and figure it out later. You know, because I was so planned and so rigid that if anything didn't go as planned, I'm like, "Ooh, I'm nuts."
yeah.
So I've learned to kind of let go. I've learned to value peace and rest. And through all of that, that kind of speaks to, you know, be content in the season that you're in, whatever that season is. Whatever my season is right now, I enjoy this season. And there'll be another season that's going to be coming, but this one I enjoy.
Staying
And
present. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
I'm sure you're still busy though. I mean, with all the things you're doing from a marketing standpoint, obviously, for other people, companies, and then, but let's talk about the podcast.
Yeah.
What prompted you to start it?
Yeah, so again, it was me tackling my fear. It was me conquering my fear. Um, I wanted to I wanted to speak to people about their journeys and I wanted to share those journeys. So that's where the podcast it started as a television show. And
Oh,
it's still
okay.
a TV show. Yeah, it started as a TV show and it's still a television show, but I'm also a podcast. So, so that's how it started. And my goal was to just share stories, like how it doesn't have, you don't have to be famous. You don't have to be an entrepreneur. You don't have to be a business person. I'm a huge believer that everybody's story, no matter what your credentials, everybody's story has such an impact. And some of the stories that have been the most powerful are those that, somebody's just day to day. It's like, oh, how did you make it? Like, what happened? It's
Hmm.
like, well, they were doing this, they were doing this, they grew up this way, blah, blah, blah. And it's like these are real people with real stories that real other real people can really relate to. And that was my passion because I relate to that. You
Hmm.
know, I I don't necessarily relate to titles or success in that way. I relate to the journey. It's like, how in the world did you decide to overcome that? Because that was a decision. You could have not. So how did you
Yeah.
do? And to me, that's what I wanted the crux of the show to be, so people could leave and say, you know what, I can do it too. You know what, I'm going through this, but let me try this. I think I can make
Yeah,
it
I
too.
think that's one of the things that makes it so interesting is that I think we live in this world of social media where everybody's trying to block everything but what's great in their life.
Mm,
Look at, what I did, look at my kids and how great they are, look at the great vacation I went on, look at my nice car, like whatever. And then but behind all that facade is a bunch of real people that,
mm,
they don't put that face forward because why would you, right? I mean, that's not what it's for, but that's what you're uncovering, I guess, in these interviews you're doing is you're finding the realness, the reality behind people. And I think that's why people can identify so much with it and why they find it so interesting is because you don't feel like you're on an island. It's not
yeah,
like I think so many times you look at social media every day and you're like, oh man, why isn't my life like that? Well, theirs isn't either.
yeah, right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, and people don't, and we have to guard against that. We really do. Because, and by we, I mean me, because I'll see things and it's just like, oh, I don't have, oh, let me work harder. Oh, it's like,
Yep.
but that, even if that is what I want, that's not my journey. That's not my story. Now set your goals and strategize to get where you want to go, but that is not the metric. Like that is not. So we do show a lot of highlight reels of our lives. And I think that that's fair to the public because that kind of stuff is encouraging, and nobody
Yeah.
wants to like see a whole show of Eeyore all day long. Like,
Good
oh,
point.
so there has to be that balance. But you're correct. There has to be that tangible realness. Like this, that it has to be something that is an actual human journey and a human experience that everybody goes through, that everybody can relate to. And I think whether you're super rich or you're super struggling, everybody has a sense of what it means to strive, and everybody has a sense of what it means to keep trying and keep moving forward.
Yeah. Well, do you think that the when you first started it, did you think it was going to be as successful and widely watched and listened to as it is now?
No. No, and and again, I was terrified.
Yeah.
I was absolutely terrified. Um, I did not.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that it is. And I think for me, the growth of it is um, when people will come on and they say, "Oh, I just enjoy your personality," or "You're such a joy to talk to."
Yeah.
And to hear that to me in this season of my life means so much because I spent so much time running from the person that you see now. You know what I mean? Like I spent so much time trying not to be that. So when somebody says anything positive about that, I'm just in awe of it because it's like, oh wow, huh, that's different. You know what I mean? Like it's
Yeah.
just so I think that one of the things is yes, I'm surprised that it's catching on like it is, and I'm glad that it is. Um, and I'm also surprised at not being afraid. Like this has really helped me to not be afraid and to see myself like face to face every single time. Because while I'm talking to you, I see me. It's like it's this
Yeah.
whole thing. So I'm like, I don't know. It's like I'm encouraging myself at the same time, and I'm showing myself that I can do it one more time and do it again, and the world won't fall apart. And I ain't going, I'm
Yeah.
not explode.
You'll never be an arrogant or cocky person. I don't think you have a, you know, arrogant bone in your body. But I do find it interesting as you're talking. I'm just listening and I'm hearing what you're saying and like trying to, you know, being the real you and having somebody say to you, on air or otherwise, that, you know, you're fun to talk to, that you're an easy conversationalist, you know, people feel comfortable sharing with you. Um, I felt that way 20 years ago, 24 years ago when we first met. But I remember back to then, and as you're talking, I'm thinking about it. I'm like, I don't remember exactly, but I don't know that he was very good at taking compliments either. Do you think that you struggled to take compliments back then because of that flight away from even the good parts of who you were?
Yes.
Interesting.
I could take compliments on my work. Whatever I could produce, I could take compliments on. Do you know what
Yeah.
I mean? Like, because I
Yep.
can tangibly see that. No, that is a good song. Oh, that is pretty. I'm glad you do like that. Or, this is good makeup. I'm glad you do like it. That was a good strategy. I did do that well. Thank you. But it's the personal ones about me as an individual or me as a character or me as Phillip that if I'm now okay with accepting because I am now okay with accepting me.
Hmm.
You know,
It's so
so
interesting to me.
so if somebody were to say, you're a great conversationalist, I would think that you're talking to the person that I just created.
Hmm.
You're not really talking to me. It's like, well, I'm glad you like that character. Thank you. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Almost like
Like,
dismissive, almost like, oh yeah, okay.
yeah, because I wouldn't feel you're talking to me. I feel you're talking to whoever I just presented to you. You think you're talking to me. You're talking to like this mask that I put on. So it's like, oh,
Yeah.
I'm
This has
glad.
so many angles.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
interesting. Well, no. I mean, I'm sure there's lots of people out there that feel the same way, and they probably can't even figure it out. I mean, it's like sometimes you just have a something that goes off in your head, and I'll just share one quick story. I don't know if I've ever shared this with you or if I shared it on your podcast, but I mean, my story is completely different, obviously, and I shared a lot of it on your podcast. But um, I the biggest aha moment of my entire life was sitting on a lazy boy chair in my living room with my 3.5-year-old in my right arm and my 3-month-old in my left arm, having nothing to do with the kids, but I'm watching Sports Center because I'm an early riser and I'm up and my wife's sleeping and I'm sitting there watching this coach, a football coach, basically just get beat up by a reporter verbally, just would not let him up. And by the end of to paraphrase, by the end of the interview, he says, "Look, you know, coach, you haven't had a Heisman Trophy winner in like 8 years. You haven't won a bowl game in a few years. You haven't won a national championship since the same 8 years ago. Your job's on the line. Why are you smiling?" And it's like the reporter was trying to get a rise out of the guy and it couldn't do it. You know, he couldn't break through his positive attitude that he was basically emitting. And he said, and again, I paraphrase, he said something to the effect of, and this was the haha moment for me. He said something to the effect of, I've had Heisman Trophy winners. I've won multiple national championships. I've won several bowl games. And what I've learned is that every time I hit a milestone like that, it's fun for a few hours. But then I wake up the next morning and I wake up and I ask myself, now what? What's next? And it's
Mm,
over. Like,
yeah.
so you bust your butt and you work hard and you stress yourself out. You stretch yourself till
Mm,
you're ready to snap, right? You're being pulled personally, business, friends, so many directions. And then one day you hit it, whatever the goal is that you were euphorically hoping to hit, and you hit it and you think you anticipate this overwhelming feeling of excitement. And then
yeah.
you get about half that. And then when it's over, you're like, man, that was short. It's like
Yeah.
now it's what's next, right? So I think that he said that I've learned that right now is the fun part,
Mm,
rebuilding. And I think that's what was the aha moment for me is that if we all look at our lives, not just in business, but in our personal lives, is in between those milestones, whether that be something as simple as an age or things you're trying to accomplish personally with relationships or in business goals, if you look at the journey is the fun part, the
mm,
building is the fun part. The destinations, they might mean something to you, I suppose, but I imagine that if you don't look at the destiny or the journey as the fun part, the rebuilding part is the fun part, then I guarantee you the destinations are not going to be, it's going to be like a bottle rocket, like, tiny
yeah.
little pop at the top. But anyway, I digress.
No, I love that. I think that's really important.
Are you a
Um,
reader? You read much?
I don't.
Not read much? Okay. I was just
No,
going to
I
ask you,
don't.
get a favorite book, like a favorite book of all time that you read.
I have a favorite looking book, a few looking books. See, okay, so here's the thing about me and reading. I don't like it, but I enjoy buying books.
So honest. I love it. You like buying.
Because
Oh,
I do graphic design, so it's like, oh my God, that book is amazing. They're like, what's it about? Like, I don't know, but look at this font. Like look at these colors. I have this
that cover
orange
is
book
so
over.
catchy. Yeah.
Right, I have this orange book over here, and it's just super simple. It's almost like matte with some embossed lettering, very sleek. I don't know what this book says,
Yeah.
but it's very good over there.
All right. So what kind of legacy do you want to lead? You're impacting more and more people every day that you
Mhm.
run a podcast, not to mention in your personal, day-to-day walks of life. So, what kind of legacy do you hope to lead, and how do you want to impact the world around you, given what you're doing, what you're trying to attempt here?
I hope to leave a legacy, I guess, of hope. I would like to be the example of, um, in spite of, we all have feelings and we all have things that we have to go through. But hopefully, my story and everything that I do leads to, I guess, the final destination of, in spite of, keep going. In spite of, keep inspiring. In spite of, you're still an example for people around you.
Have you made that T-shirt yet?
What, in spite of?
In spite of, keep going.
No, I should, huh?
You should.
But that's, I mean, that's what I want. I think we're all, and I mentioned it a little bit earlier. I think we all are examples. We are, whether we like it, whether we want it, whether we don't, regardless, in our sphere of influence, somebody is watching us and learning something, and I hope that as intentional as I am with the show, as intentional as I am with, say, music, I hope the common thread through that is whatever you're going through, history will show that you'll make it out. Keep going.
Yeah, I love it. When you look back on life so far, and you got a lot of life left to live here, what are you most proud of? And how do you think your experiences and the message you're sharing contributes to your belief of true wealth? Having nothing to do with money at all.
Mm, sure. I think, what am I the most proud
Yeah, what are
of?
you most proud of?
Mm, I am most, hmm, what am I most proud of? I think I'm most proud of not giving up.
Hmm.
I know,
Resilience.
yeah, I was actually having a conversation the other day with my therapist, and we were talking, and it just hit me, and I said it a little bit here, but I'm proud of the fact that I find myself worth fighting for. And that was a different light bulb. Even through all the journeys, even through all the challenges, even through all the confusion, even through all the dislikes and all of these things, for some reason I thought that Philip was worth fighting for, because I kept fighting. So I think I'm most proud of, that for myself. That's what I would say, personally. Um, I'm proud of, um, I would say that, and I'd probably put a full stop there.
Yeah, no, you're fine. All right. So we said people how to get a hold of you. So we got
Sure.
podcast. We got philipo'rourke.com, got the
Yeah.
phillipshow.com, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, probably a million other places, other mediums as well.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to share in terms of the initiatives you're running?
No, just follow me find me on any of those platforms. The phillipshow.com, you can just find me there and everything can stream from there. The show also comes on Roku TV and Amazon Fire TV. So if you have any of those apps, feel free to, download them and tune into the show. And if you Google my name, you'll find all music and everything like that.
Yeah,
So just be inspired. Hopefully you will be.
I love it. And check out the music for sure, because like I said, lyrical and melodic genius. True story. True story. All right, everybody. I think we ran out of time for today, but before we go, I just want to thank you so much for joining us. There's thousands of podcasts out there, thousands of podcasts, and you chose to give this one a listen or a watch. So thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you for joining us on the Retirement Fiduciary Podcast. To see any charts or images that were mentioned on this show, to check out additional articles, videos, and other educational resources, or to set up an intro call with your host, Adam Koos, just head over to libertaswealth.com. This podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only and should not be relied upon as a basis for investment decisions. None of our shows engage in rendering legal, financial, tax, or other professional services. Always talk to a certified financial planner or fee-only fiduciary financial advisor before implementing any of the ideas shared in this episode.